think people surprised that Clarence Thomas wrote a 90-page dissent when it came to birthright citizenship are just surprised because they ain't never seen no real coonin before. I mean, Clarence Thomas is your everyday run-of-the-mill coon. There are a ton of him in the South. I could go up to the local Publix and find probably 10 of Clarence Thomas's shopping at that damn local Publix, okay? And also, let me tell you this, it's so interesting because everybody that has a regular job, like I'm not a content creator full-time. I have a regular working class job where I work with a lot of regular working class people, okay? And everybody at their job, not saying my job that I have now, but everybody at their job can think of that one coon, okay, that be on the premises, that one coon that every time management says something or every time management makes a racist joke, they're like, ha 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 ha, yeah. Everybody knows that one coon in the workplace. And it's so interesting because Justice Jackson, like, of course, she wrote her dissenting opinion, but then she also had a separate section where she gathered Clarence Thomas and his race and color blindness theory. That's the thing. Clarence Thomas is one of those black folks where people are like, oh my gosh, I don't understand how he blah, blah, blah. White supremacy is a multinational ideology, and Clarence Thomas has a PhD in it, honey.
A black Supreme Court justice just wrote 91 pages arguing against a constitutional protection that has shielded millions of people born on American soil, and somehow we are supposed to applaud to that. Welcome back. Before we get into this, drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and if you're new here, make sure you hit that like and subscribe right now so you never miss a breakdown like this one. Now, let's be clear about what is actually happening here. Clarence Thomas, a man who has directly benefited every civil rights protection this country has ever extended, filed a dissent that will fundamentally narrow the definition of who gets to be called American. He wrapped it in history. He invoked Dred Scott. He used the language of black liberation to build an argument that at its core restricts rights rather than expands them. And that is the contradiction that people are responding to, because the 14th Amendment was born from a moment when this country was forced to reckon with who it had excluded. Using that same amendment to draw a new line around who gets excluded, that is not honoring its legacy, that is repurposing it. The outrage is not about politics for everyone voicing it. For a lot of people, it's about principle. And that's the conversation worth having.
Second black U.S. Supreme Court justice, and he takes this stance. Let's read it together. Blacks were entitled to citizenship because they were Americans. I bet the founding fathers didn't agree with that. Let's continue. They had no other homeland, owed no allegiance to any foreign power, and were subject to no other authority. Let's dissect that for a second. If the 14th Amendment was only intended for former slaves, descendants of another foreign power, therefore they did have a place from which they came, although whether they wanted to go back is up for debate. Nonetheless, your words contradict your argument. He goes on to say the same cannot be said for the children of foreign temporary visitors. So the distinction between slaves and immigrants, refugees, is that one was brought by force and the other is a willing visitor.
Tell me why Justice Clarence Thomas wrote a 91-page dissertation in the Supreme Court's decision striking down Trump's birthright citizenship ruling. This brother is a real-life Uncle Ruckus, bro. This is like writing a 91-page essay that you don't want foreigners in your country. Holy fuck. Besides that America was entirely founded by immigrants, the entire concept of America is a nation of immigrants. This is just insane.
The Supreme Court just did the right thing, but it's not a cause for celebration. In a split decision, the court blocked Donald Trump from eliminating birthright citizenship and upheld 160 years of settled law that people born in the U.S. are citizens of this country. That was the only correct decision from the beginning. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution clearly says all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. are citizens of the U.S., and no president can overturn the Constitution by executive order. The fact that this case even got to the Supreme Court shows just how far Republicans are prepared to go to take away the rights that black people fought for centuries ago. By eliminating affirmative action, DEI, and voting rights in the past few years, they tried to turn back the clock before the 1960s. And now by attacking birthright citizenship, they tried to turn it back before before the 1860s. Justice Clarence Thomas, the only black man on the court, disgraced himself again by siding with racist Donald Trump. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the only black woman on the court, called him out by name. How can you claim the Constitution is colorblind, Justice Thomas, and then limit the 14th Amendment based on race? Jackson quoted Frederick Douglass in her concurring opinion, "The glorious birthright of our common humanity will become the inheritance of all the inhabitants of this highly favored country." 173 years ago, Frederick Douglass stood right here in New York State and issued an ultimatum from black people to white America. We declare that we are, and of right, we ought to be American citizens. That was 1853. But 4 years later, the Supreme Court denied our citizenship in the infamous Dred Scott case, claiming that black people were inferior beings and had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Yes, the laws may have changed a lot since then, but the racist attitudes remain. Don't be fooled that this is just about the children of immigrants. If they can take away the 14th Amendment from them, they can take it away from black people. The fact that we are even having this discussion in the same week America celebrates its 250th birthday exposes the hypocrisy at the core of the broken promise of the Declaration of Independence. After 250 years, a revolutionary war, and a bloody civil war, much of white America still refuses to abandon the centuries-old delusion of white supremacy.
Clarence Thomas is full of crap. He knows birthright citizenship was not just meant for black people. He claims that he voted to overturn birthright citizenship because the 14th Amendment was specifically written to protect the citizenship of formerly enslaved black people. As a legal expert, he is surely aware of the unambiguous language contained in the 14th Amendment. Yes, the affirming of the citizenship for formerly enslaved black people was the impetus for the establishment of the 14th Amendment, but it actually went much farther than that. The citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment reads as follows: "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." That language is pretty unambiguous, but people who oppose the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment love nothing more than creating hair-splitting, tedious legal arguments around what the framers meant by subject to the jurisdiction thereof, when there would be no question as to whether a person residing on U.S. soil is subject to its jurisdiction where crime is concerned. If you're born in Jersey and your parents are undocumented citizens of Colombia, you're still subject to the laws of New Jersey. So are your parents. If you're undocumented and you so much as steal a pack of gum, you cannot claim immunity because you're a foreign national and not subject to the jurisdiction of New Jersey. They'll throw the book at you. Clarence Thomas and every other justice on that court understands that. The truth is that Clarence Thomas has not done one thing to protect the rights of black people in this country since he beat the Anita Hill sex pest allegations 30 years ago. And now he wants to use rights that we've held for over 150 years to marginalize another group of people? Clarence Thomas is a corrupt and compromised ideologue who is routinely engaged in the most blatant, ladder-pulling shenanigans known to man. These are not good faith arguments that he's making. They're driven by his allegiance to upholding nativist, xenophobic, and exclusionary mindsets that have existed since this country's founding. Now, shout out to the justices who showed courage in resisting the never-ending drumbeat of nationalist propaganda that's permeating our culture right now. Let's keep up the resistance. To read or listen to my full breakdown on this topic, become a member of my Substack community at darastartucker.substack.com.
I'm going to do a little deeper dive into the Supreme Court birthright citizenship decision, and I want to talk about Clarence Thomas's dissent on the issue. If he's right, this case could completely reshape how the 14th Amendment is understood. Justice Clarence Thomas argued that the Supreme Court didn't actually rule on whether the 14th Amendment protects birthright citizenship. Instead, he focused on whether a lower court should have the power to block a federal policy nationwide before the case was fully resolved. Thomas argued that federal injunctions have no basis in the Constitution or in the traditional powers of federal courts. He said judges are supposed to resolve the issues of parties before them and not effectively issue orders that govern the entire country. He warned that this practice lets a single district court judge override the decisions of the elected branches of the government. He also said it encourages litigants to file cases in courts where they think they can get a favorable judge. He traced the history of equitable belief back to English courts. He concluded that the courts historically lacked the authority to issue these sweeping nationwide orders. In his view, the federal courts have assumed power that was never granted to them by Congress. His message was simple: whether you support the president's policy or not isn't the point. The Constitution limits judicial power just as much as it limits executive power. He said this matters because the court should be deciding individual cases, not supervising the executive branch through nationwide injunctions. Are you able to follow along? Do you have questions or comments? You know what to do.
All right, listen up. Most Americans have never actually read and probably will never read the argument Justice Clarence Thomas just made in his dissent about birthright citizenship. So to understand it, we need to start with one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in American history, Dred Scott versus Sanford. In 1857, the Supreme Court said that black Americans could not be citizens of the United States. Chief Justice Roger Taney infamously wrote that black people had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Now, after the Civil War, Congress moves to destroy that doctrine forever during Reconstruction. According to Justice Thomas, he writes that the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th Amendment were designed to guarantee citizenship to black Americans who had been denied it under Dred Scott. Thomas argues that citizenship was guaranteed to people born and domiciled in the United States, people who were genuine members of the American political community. And then he makes what I believe is his strongest point. He writes that black Americans were citizens because they were Americans. They had no other homeland, owed no allegiance to any foreign power, and were subject to no other authority. He then cites Frederick Douglass, who said that they fought and bled in America's battles and could be called upon to defend America in time of war. Martin Luther King Jr. once observed that the American Negro is not an African. He is neither totally African nor totally Western. He is a unique American people. And that's why I agree with Thomas. Citizenship should mean allegiance. It should mean membership. It should mean that America is your home. So if someone enters the country illegally and then maintains their political allegiance somewhere else, why should citizenship automatically pass to the next generation? Thomas's question isn't really about immigration. His question is very simple. What does it actually mean to be an American?
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's dissent was 91 pages long. 91 pages long. The majority's opinion was 26 on birthright citizenship. That nigga was mad. The coon was hurting.
Hey, yo, chat. You see these blackity black jigaboos talking bad about Clarence Thomas? It's not because they're pro-black. It's because they are pro-Democrat. These blackity blacks are so buck broken by the Democrat Party. They vote for their own oppression. That's why they don't understand his 91-page dissent and the 14th Amendment. They've been brainwashed by these liberal indoctrination camps. So everything that is good for them is just an adverse reaction. They just can't comprehend. They look at Ketanji Brown Jackson as the person with reason. Could you imagine? Now I understand the whole story about the children of Israel. I was asking myself, like, why were they wandering in the wilderness for 40 years? And then you look at the modern day version of that, which is the blackity black jigaboos, trapped on the Democrat plantation. Like, their bodies are physically free, but their mental is enslaved, and they will continue to walk that Democrat line. They will never buck the system. They can't, how Jesus say repent? They think it's a religious word. It's like, you got to change the way that you think. These blackity blacks ain't no saving them. Just point and laugh at them and raise your kids to just look. Don't end up like these fools, because that's what they are. They're fools. They don't understand legislation. They don't understand the system of government. Only thing they understand is massa says vote blue no matter who. I'm going to vote blue no matter who. Sad.
Birthright citizenship is now constitutionally bound. So Kagan, Sotomayor, Jackson, Roberts, and Barrett, all five voted in favor of keeping birthright citizenship based on what it says in the Constitution. So those five, they said, first off, that is rooted in English common law. Come on now, founding fathers. Just solely. And just solely means of the land, born on the soil. We're keeping it. It's old and it's traditional. Fuck off. They also said, let's look at the 14th Amendment and Dred Scott. This was created as a direct rejection of a racial caste system in the United States of America. Okay, now that we're over with the good news, let's talk about Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas says that the 14th Amendment was a temporary remedy to solve the problem that Dred Scott and slavery created, which was that formerly enslaved people had no former homeland. And he is stating on the basis that birthright citizenship, it was only a temporary fix for that, and it was only for formerly enslaved people, and that domicile should be the main basis of citizenship. And domicile meaning your parents were born here, and your parents' parents was born here, and your parents' parents' parents was born here. And although Clarence Thomas looks at the 14th Amendment as a narrow repair or a temporary quick fix, Ketanji Jackson, she went against what he said. She addressed him, actually. She said what he said was insulting to what the Reconstruction era actually was. And she also said that it was to create an anti-caste, anti-subordinate system, and it was a reset for citizenship. That's what the 14th Amendment was. It was that Black people, Black Americans fought hard so that this country could not further insubordinate or decide who was a citizen based on their hereditary background. She even backs up her opinion by saying, well, when they voted on it and they created this, they even brought up the Roma people and Chinese immigrants, and they still decided to keep it the way it was. So domicileship makes no sense. Thomas is arguing that Black freedom was a specific remedy for a specific historical group, and Jackson is arguing no, Black freedom produced a constitutional rule against inherited exclusion itself. And now, what does a constitutional holding or a constitutional rule mean? Why is it important that Amy Coney Barrett was on the side of birthright citizenship? Because a president nor Congress can never change that now. Because 5 justices have affirmed the amendment and the wording in the Constitution, it can never be changed. No one can challenge it. No one can come back and appeal it. It's done. It's final decision. So now citizenship can't be used as an immigration policy, which is very, very good. Do you guys want to talk about Alito? Alito was talking about you need to pledge allegiance to the fucking flag. And you know what's dangerous about Alito's thought is that, like, it requires more than just being born here, meaning like slavery. They might be like, you have to work here for 5 years for free as an indentured servant, and then you can have your citizenship. That's what makes that thought process and that ideology dangerous, right? Let's move on to Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh disagreed with Trump, saying that he could not do this via executive order because of Congress's citizenship rule. Not because he doesn't agree with it or he wants birthright citizenship, but just because technically Trump did it wrong. And Gorsuch don't know what he want. He was like, well, maybe permanent, temporary, like if you're visiting, you a tourist, you have a baby here, that baby don't belong here. And then he was like, but I'm not really too clear on it. I like Native Americans. Y'all got anything else y'all want me to say?
They're both right. And that's what makes this exchange between Ketanji Brown Jackson and Clarence Thomas so revealing. Justice Jackson is right because she points out Clarence Thomas's hypocrisy. Clarence Thomas has spent his entire judicial career arguing that the Constitution is colorblind. In the affirmative action case, Thomas laid out what he called originalist defense of the colorblind Constitution. That was the argument used to end race-conscious affirmative action. But now in the birthright citizenship case, he can see race. He argues that the 14th Amendment was mainly written as a Reconstruction-era remedy for formerly enslaved people and their children. Essentially, when race-conscious history helps restrict affirmative action, he says that the Constitution must be colorblind. But when race-conscious history helps narrow birthright citizenship, suddenly he could see race. That's Justice Jackson's point. Thomas can see color when he wants to, but only when seeing color gets him the result that he believes in. But here's where Clarence Thomas is also right. Historically, his 14th Amendment was absolutely born out of slavery, Civil War, and the Supreme Court's racist Dred Scott decision. But the problem for Thomas is that the text did not say formerly enslaved people. It said all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, that language was broad on purpose. And this is exactly why the Supreme Court case, United States versus Wong Kim Ark, mattered so much in 1898. The government tried to deny him citizenship after he returned from a trip to China. According to historians, this case put the Supreme Court in a very interesting predicament, because if the government could say that Wong Kim Ark was not a citizen because of his parents' status or race, then citizenship would no longer be a constitutional guarantee, essentially threaten the citizenship claims of millions of white immigrant children that were born here. Real issue isn't whether or not the 14th Amendment was born out of a history of race. Of course it was. And that's why Ketanji Brown Jackson's critique hit so hard. Clarence Thomas wants originalism, constitutional originalism, when it limits rights, and he wants colorblindness when it blocks remedies. But when the history of the 14th Amendment becomes inconvenient, suddenly he's willing to read race back into the Constitution. Clarence Thomas is right about where the amendment came from. Ketanji Brown Jackson is right about what he's doing with it. If you like history like this, follow for more.
Making headlines today. I thought I would just remind everybody that our legal institution is based on misogyny, and I want to remind everyone about what happened in 1991 when he was nominated to the Supreme Court by President H.W. Bush, because a lot of people have either forgotten or maybe you were too young to know. I remember I was 21 and I watched the court proceedings. A woman named Anita Hill, a law professor and a former colleague of Thomas, came forward before the Senate Judiciary Committee and described in great detail and in a very professional manner a pattern of sexual harassment. She was not vague about anything. She described Thomas repeatedly bringing up pornography in the workplace, making comments about his own body, and asking her out repeatedly after she made it clear she was not interested. She sat in front of that committee, greatly composed and credible. She had nothing to gain from doing this. She knew what was coming, and what came was a coordinated effort to discredit her. She was called a liar. Senators asked her why, if the harassment was real, she had continued to work for him. Thomas went before the same committee and called the proceedings a high-tech lynching. He performed outrage, and in October of 91, the Senate confirmed him to the Supreme Court by a vote of 52 to 48. It was the narrowest margin for Supreme Court confirmation in over a century. And here's what we need to sit with. Anita Hill was not disbelieved because her story was incredible. She was disbelieved, or more accurately, she was just dismissed because the behavior she described was considered normal. It was not considered disqualifying. The harassment she witnessed, the entitlement, the refusal to accept no, that was all treated as ordinary. Most men could relate to it, and they didn't think it disqualified. It disqualified him. That's just how powerful men are. This is the system we are a part of, and a man who was elevated to the highest court in the land under those circumstances has been making decisions about women's lives, women's bodies, and women's rights ever since.
Birthright citizenship is being upheld, and you guys have been waiting for me to talk about this. I know, I got the DMs. Thank you so much. I'm honored that you guys even want me to speak about it, so let me get into it. I want everyone to understand, okay? When people are opposing this, it's not because, and let me be frank and clear, there are some people that are just racist and they just want to make people's lives complicated and all of that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we know that. But majority of people understand how damaging this loophole is to our country and economy, okay? You have people that are purposely 34, 35 weeks pregnant, abusing an element of our Constitution that was originally for Black Americans, going even deeper, slaves. Now, I am a firm believer in our Constitution. I stand on the principles of this great country, but also I understand how we did not foresee the abuse of this. And now it's became a huge problem. And as an American citizen, how are we How are we? Just think about this. We're supposed to obey the laws of the land, correct? You go commit murder, you're going to prison. You commit fraud, you're going to prison. You get the gist, okay? So why is it some laws we make okay and we let some people abuse our system and we don't blink an eye? Because really, if you guys go back and you really research this thing, you understand that the damage of having a child here in the United States, and you as the parent are not a legal citizen, the position that you are putting your child in, but also the position that you're putting our country in, because now we are responsible for that child. What is that child supposed to do without their parents? What resources and money does that child have without their parents? Don't we aid a lot of illegal immigrants? Don't we? You get health care? You get stipends? You get free housing? Oh my God. So why is it okay for some people to abuse the system? But if me and you do it, we're criminals. I just want you to think about that moving forward with this whole issue. My heart goes out because I really want people to live peaceful, fruitful, prospering lives. But there's a way you go about it. And the Constitution, yes, it says if you are born here on American soil, you are an American citizen. But when does it become abuse?
And that is what keeps getting lost in all of this noise. People are focused on the political chess match and they are completely missing the human cost sitting underneath it. Clarence Thomas did not just write a legal opinion, he wrote a roadmap, and if followed, would strip citizenship from children who have never known any other country, any other home, or any other flag. Children who grew up in American schools pledged allegiance to the American flag and built their entire identity around being from here. And the argument used to justify that, the very amendment bled and fought for by enslaved ancestors, was turned into the instrument to do it. That is not a technicality. That is not just constitutional originalism. That is a choice, and choices made from the highest court in the land have consequences that last generations. So before anyone calls the outrage performative, before anyone dismisses the people pushing back as simply being anti-conservative or pro-Marxist, ask yourself this: what does it actually mean to protect a community? Is it protecting a legal concept or is it protecting the people? Because those two things are not always the same. And the day we forget that is the day the law stops serving justice and starts serving itself. If this breakdown makes you think, makes you question, or makes you disagree, that is exactly the point. Hit like, leave a comment with your take, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. Because this conversation is not over and it's just getting started.